So if you're going to be assembling a completely new mechanism and you have all the replacement parts, you can just use the old one here as your guide. But since I'm going to be reusing some of these parts, I'm going to replace one of the sides at a time here. I'm going to start by pulling this retaining clip here. Now I'm going to remove the Torx head fastener on each of the cross supports on this side. Start by putting the rod in first. Get them good and tight. I'm going to make sure that these plastic pieces toward the front of the mech are in the same position. They do rotate, so I want to make sure that they're in the same position as the original. Same procedure for the opposite side, starting with removing the clip. Slide the rod back on. Install the clip. Make sure it's good and tight. Now this side of the mechanism is where the activation cable is attached. And you can see there's a small spring and a plastic part where the cable end attaches. So if these parts are still in good shape, you can simply transfer them over. If yours are not in good shape, if they're broken, make sure you add these parts to your part list. So we're just going to pull this out. There's a little slot for that to install and rotate around. And we're just going to install it on the new scissors. Now this unit's ready to reinstall in the seat frame. I should mention that when you lift these units out or put them back in, you want to make sure and grab them somewhere where you don't have to worry about if the scissors swing open or closed. You don't have to worry about them striking your hand or your fingers. So usually the best place to do that is by grabbing these center supports. Okay, so we're ready to reattach this unit to the seat rails. Now some manufacturers provide an adjustment here at this attachment point, so you can move the unit slightly forward or back. And that can come in handy when you reassemble this, for example, and let's say the footrest doesn't want to latch. By moving the unit forward a little bit, you can often resolve issues like that. So when I removed these screws, I noticed they were in there pretty tight. So I'm going to just add a little bit of grease to the tip of the screws to get them to go in a bit easier. So I'm going to start all 4 screws. And tighten them firmly. And now reattach the footrest. Now let's reattach the activation cable. We're going to start by attaching this clip to the tab on the mechanism first. Then we're going to take the cable end and clip it on here. Next, we're going to install the mechanism spring on the side of the mechanism. It attaches from here, this plastic part, to this metal connection here. And you always want to install tension springs in the position where they have the least amount of stretch or tension on them. And that's usually when the footrest is open. And that's the case here as well. So we're going to hook this through the plastic end first. And as you can see, we don't have far to go, so I can stretch this by hand. So let's try it out. Now this mechanism also has another tension spring, a larger one, that will be installed when this unit is put back on the floor rails. So we can't really get the full sense of the operation until the unit is fully installed. But at this point, with one spring on, we can check to make sure the operation is smooth by working it back and forth. So it looks good. Normally when I finish up a repair like this, I like to jump in the seat and demonstrate how the recliner works. But with this section, I'm not going to be able to do that. It needs to be reassembled on the floor rails and this spring reattached before we can test final operation. So I'll remind the customer when he picks it up that after he assembles it to let me know if he has any problems. 2 final tips. If you're working on a one-piece mechanism like this one, in a love seat, a sofa, or a reclining section, probably the most important thing to be aware of is safety when you're removing the unit or reinstalling it on the seat frame. And that's why earlier in the video I showed you how to safely grab it so that if the scissors open or close while you're moving it, they cannot come down on your hand or fingers. It's very important. So if you want to be extra cautious, you can simply tie the mechanism shut with some rope or twine before you move them. So if you've never done this type of repair before, you want to be very cautious and deliberate and take your time. Okay, and also when you're ordering parts for the mechanism, if you have a cable release, like this unit does, it's always a good time to add this to your parts list. So in the future, when one of these fails, you have a spare on hand that you can install.